our company's Uber. The history of the company is started by Travis Kalanick at the top, and he proposed it to his friend Camp over here, Garrett Camp, and he was inspired by the movie James Bond to have an app where you just watch your car pull up and see it real time where the car is. So they got to designing it, and they first launched their product in San Francisco, where they were both working tech companies at the time, and decided to devote their time to just Uber. They first they started off with buying a bunch of Mercedes to like make it like James Bond, pretty much. They said so. It's what turned into Uber Black now. Was what they started with. Eventually, originally they launched as Uber Cab, and they dropped the cab service or part of their name, and then made it contract working, where you know how it is, where they bring their own car and the driver works independently from the company. This is I didn't have the dates because it's kind of all over the place, and it depends on region where it was when it was released. But their first product was Uber Black, which I described, and then Uber X is their main product. And they've just consistently, as problems have arose, they just add a new idea to fix it. Everything from like carpooling to the Uber Auto, which is like the rickshaw things they have out in like mostly Europe and I think Middle East. And I mean, you've seen the scooters and bikes around. That's their newer form of like last mile transportation. It's called, like after you get out of the Uber to get to the even further destination that you can only get through sidewalks or whatever. And for the future, they're working on Uber Air up there, which is that picture over there. It's electric airplanes that they're gonna try and launch in, I believe Los Angeles. Yeah, Los Angeles and New York. And a big part of their history is their lawsuits. That's since they're a relatively new company, they don't have much to their name except for the products in their lawsuits. And it's kind of a important case in the business world for the drivers versus Uber, because it's gonna set a precedence for contract workers. So like, they don't have significant benefits right now, and they're suing for just workers' rights, basically. And then later on, they got into many sexual harassment lawsuits that even led to Kalanick, the creator of the company, resigning as the CEO. There's just a lot of different cases, mostly at their headquarters, and of course with the drivers, they're trying to find a result for that. And then this is most recently, there's the ADA violation, which is Americans with Disabilities Act. They charge a late fee if you take over 2 minutes to get into your cab, and that violates the Disabilities Act. If you have a wheelchair or something and you need to get in, it takes longer, they're gonna charge you more. So now they're paying plaintiffs their charges or expenditures that they charge them. And this is their financial history. It kind of starts off pretty early when the company was just started, and they got a $1.25 million investment from Sean Fanning, who's a huge tech guy. He invented Napstar, which is like a dating or data sharing website for like music and stuff like that. It's pretty popular in the late 90s. And you can see that there's like huge growth from 2013 to 2016. Like, as most people in the business world would call it, as a unicorn company. It just took off and exploded, and just way above the projected evaluations. And then now it's Uber Eats is increasing in value, and the other services, the transportations are kind of dipping a little bit just because of the pandemic. And it's leveling off now, but in the last year we were valued at $59.68 billion, which is still incredible for how new of a company it is.
I'm Skylar, and I'm covering the environmental analysis. Some of the forces are competitive forces. So of course Lyft is our main brand competitor. They have like the same whole idea. They also do the rideshare idea where it's you have your app, you call it, you can get pooling, just all the same kind of benefits. However, for us, we have, I think it's about 85 countries that we are available in right now, to where Lyft is only available in the United States and Canada. So we have that benefit over them. Another competitive force is taxis. They are a little bit different, so that's why I call them a product competitor, and also public transportation. So it's not the same idea, you can't like hail these on apps, but if you're in New York for say, taxis are still very popular where you can just hail it on the street. Economically, Uber is leaving the depression stage and coming into a growth, I believe. Because of the pandemic, there was like a lack of willingness to spend money just because of the risks that were associated with it, like contracting COVID. And then as other groups have talked about, gas prices recently have been up, and so drivers do not want to spend all this money on gas when they're still being paid the same wages. However, I believe that Uber Eats had the opposite trend during the pandemic, just because people did not want to go out and go grab their food themselves just because of the risk. So they thought like having someone drive and bring their food to them would be a good way to combat that. Political and legal forces. Growing internationally has had a lot of troubles, just because, as he brought up previously, we classify our drivers as contractors instead of employees. So what comes with that is they do not get a lot of the same benefits you do as if you were called an employee, because they do not get minimum wage. They also do not get paid time off or any like vacation hours or unpaid vacation of any sort. This is a huge issue in other countries because they've had a lot of trouble where they will not agree to classify their drivers as contractors, and they have ended up just kind of merging with some brands internationally or not being able to go there and be successful. Socially, COVID-19 has had a big impact, as we all know. The willingness to spend on Uber has been down a lot. As I mentioned, because of catching COVID, drivers not wanting to have strangers in their car, and gas prices. Safety issue-wise, there's been a lot of bad light shed on the lack of safety with Uber recently, just because we've all heard like the stories in the news of drivers and riders being like robbed or kidnapped, and we have not added enough safety measures in combating this issue. However, for the pandemic, the one thing we have done is we put a masking policy to kind of combat like the willingness, not being able to have strangers in the car. Both drivers and riders have to have a mask even if you're vaccinated, and that is still our policy to today.
So, this brings us into the current marketing plan. This is a little excerpt from their mission statement. It's a little bit of a longer mission statement, so I really just pulled something that was relevant to this section. They say, we're a tech company that connects the physical and digital worlds to make movement happen at the tap of a button for everyone, everywhere. And they go into explain that they want to make a safe, reliable, convenient environment for all, despite your gender, race, religion, sexual orientation. And they want to eventually be one of the biggest taxi services or ride-sharing services in the world. So their marketing objectives, it's kind of a little sticky because they have both customers and drivers, because they have to focus on how to keep customers using the service, but also because the drivers are contract workers, they also have to figure out how to give them enough incentives to keep them driving and working for them to provide those services for the customers, while also not spending a huge amount of money that they can't afford on their drivers. They also have to allow their drivers to work on their own schedule as well, so they're not under a 9 to 5 kind of schedule. Also, with customers, they just have to keep that strong relationship, because how do you keep a customer from going to Lyft if Lyft has like a couple dollars cheaper services? Or how do you keep your customers at your company? Because ride sharing, you can't really make it unique in a lot of ways. So, but Uber has tried and done that by their wide variety of services, like Uber Pool, where it's a cheaper option, or they offer more high-end services where you can drive in the luxury cars, like Elijah was mentioning. They through this, as you saw on like the second slide, because they have so many services, it appeals to a larger target market to maybe entice lower income people as well as higher income people, because it varies in prices. For their target market and segmentation, it goes a little bit out. There's a few outliers, but mainly it's people in between 20 and 40. And it's people who need quick and easy transportation, people who don't care to drive, or people who don't have cars, or they don't have access or money to do public transportation or other methods. And this obviously can fluctuate based on what service is used, because a college student with a low income isn't going to use one of their more higher priced services. This is also segmented down into drivers as well, because they have to focus on the geographic areas and where they can get more drivers versus less. Sustainability and ethics. Uber has an overall general plan. They want to be a zero emission platform by 2040. They have plans in place to help drivers go electric by making their cars electric. They're also partnering with non-governmental organizations or NGOs, advocacy groups, and environmental justice organizations to help expedite that process and going towards the clean energy transition. And if you think about the fact that companies like Chevy and Ford plan to be fully electric by 2030, this seems like a pretty realistic goal. They also release an annual climate assessment and performance report and environmental impact report. And this is a quote that I pulled from their CEO. It's a little hard to see down at the bottom, but it does say it's from their CEO. They basically are just saying that they realize they have a big impact because of the cars, exhaust and all that, and the immense amount of drivers they have out on the roads now, in addition to the drivers we already have on the road. When it comes down to health and safety, especially with the pandemic just happening in the past couple of years, there's a lot of safety issues, a lot of health issues, especially because you can't trust a stranger to drive you around. It was a foreign concept before we started doing ride sharing. So, some new safety protocols in the past years have been implemented because of those headlines that say, oh, driver kidnapped or held at gunpoint or things like that. So drivers are always required to undergo background check before they can even ride. Riders can share their location with their trusted friend through the app. There's also a driver profile that they have with a rating. Customers can leave comments and things like that. And also drivers are notified on their screen, on their phone, if they are speeding, and lets them know, hey, the speed limit is this, please slow down to ensure safety. They also have many ways, which this picture right in the middle, that's on the app itself. That is their button to take you right to the safety features of the app, where customers can report right to the authorities. They can either call or text. Every trip is tracked, and you can enable a route check section where your ride will be tracked by Uber, because they'll know your typical route that you'll be taking and the time that you should arrive. And if you're stopped at somewhere for really long, or they suspect the crash may have happened, they can report it to authorities after checking with you first. And you can also record audio if needed. Right. On to the 4 Ps, which is place, product, price, and promotion. We all know that. Product, at its core, Uber is a cab ordering ride-sharing service. They do have other services like Uber Eats, Uber Rent, where you can rent a car, but their main revenue source is a cab ordering service. And as they mentioned a little bit earlier, Place, it was first launched in San Francisco and California back in 2009. Right, as of 2022, it's in 85 plus countries. We've got 10,000 plus cities. And in the US specifically, we have all 50 states have at least one city, and we have 4,000 cities throughout the US. The US is actually the biggest consumer between customers and drivers of Uber. And as you can probably assume, it's gonna be more popular or more frequent in cities with higher populations, and most of the time it will run at all times of the day because there's usually someone up to drive and someone up to take that ride. Price and promotion. Uber has always wanted to be transparent with their pricing. They want to let the customer know that they're not trying to throw in any hidden fees like that. So the breakdown is, it comes down to a base fare, which this is to cover like administration costs and enough to compensate the driver for everything. But it changes based on if you're using a less expensive service or a more expensive service. And then there is the rate for the time duration of the ride. And that starts as soon as you get in and your driver pulls out. The distance rate is based on, Uber quotes you the lowest distance that it will take to get to your destination, but it can change afterwards if, say, you had to take a different road because of construction or things like that. There's also surge fees, which this happens if it's New York City, it's a bustling city, everyone's trying to get everywhere, and there's just a surge in demand, and Uber cannot handle it with how many drivers they have. So they'll charge a surge fee to just kind of cover up that increase in demand. They, from the beginning, relied on word of mouth because they went and took the Silicon Valley bigwigs and all that, and they offered them free rides in hopes that they'd go to their other Silicon Valley friends and, elbow rub them and stuff and get them to spread it. And it really is kind of just snowballed into what it is today because it builds up that trust and reliability. So they usually, in their advertisements, they are very good at relating it to current events as well as relating it to the geographic location. Especially with the pandemic, they released several advertisements talking about, hey, thanks for not riding with us right now because thanks for keeping your customers or your neighbors safe and everything like that. So they really like to touch on the current events and appeal to that. Their print ads are often in transportation, they're in transportation relevant areas where you're already thinking of, okay, how the heck am I gonna get to my next destination? Say like bus stops, subways, airports. There's a few select airports with kiosks where you can book an Uber. And they also promote discounted services, like first-time rider discount.
My name is Elise, and I'll be covering the SWOT analysis of Uber. So as we all know, that includes external and internal factors. Some of the strengths that Uber has, it's like Sarah mentioned before, it's pretty well recognized, mostly because it's spread by word of mouth. So you order an Uber, you have a great experience, you can rate that driver highly and tell your friends about it. And that's they rely a lot on that. They have a lot of vehicles out on the road, just in general, like we talked about before. They have everything from your minivan to your Mercedes. They're they are the market leader in the ride sharing market right now. So obviously there's other things, like the most common one is Lyft, but there's a couple other companies that do the same thing, but they kind of fell off because Uber and Lyft took the majority of the customers. They have lots of price variation, and it's just super convenient. So you're out late, you don't want to drive, for me, if there was Uber around here, I'd be like, I'm getting an Uber because I don't want to lose my parking spot in the front row. But, and Their weaknesses do include, like I mentioned before, Lyft is their largest competitor, so they face a lot of issues with competition, and later I'll talk about like first mover, late mover advantage on that. They depend a lot on their drivers, and if like the driver isn't getting the benefits they need, they're not getting those days off, or you know, the hours are super hard to work around their schedule, Uber's losing drivers, which means it's losing profit. They pretty much have a copycat business model to Lyft and vice versa, which again, like Sarah mentioned, it's hard to be unique because the service is pretty simple. They've lost a lot of money to lawsuits and just like legal issues. Poor company culture, which means that like if you like have a bad experience and you rate your driver badly, or for some reason your fare is a lot more than you expected and you're upset about it, that's again just creates kind of a negative reflection back on the company itself. There's no customer bond at all. Like you will get in a car and you'll never see that guy again. You know what I mean? So and maybe you have a really good conversation, like, hey, what's your favorite restaurant? And you know, like that looks good on the reviews, but basically you're not like, maybe you keep using Uber, but you don't really create anything personal. And it's unpredictable. Like Sarah mentioned, the surge fees, so like if there's a big concert that night or a sporting event and you don't want to try to park, you know, like you could be charged a lot more. There's lots of opportunity though, like the driverless technology and the electric cars and like air, like being able to get like a helicopter or some type of air transportation in the future. The COVID and delivery service was really big for Uber and Uber Eats, and like you could get your groceries ordered and delivered right to your house. They can always do more like variety. There's tons of makes and models of cars. There's tons of ways that people are always, transportation people are always going to be going places and needing a way to get there. And like I talked a lot about the rating and review system, which is an opportunity to do well, but it also poses like a threat to the business if you have a bad experience. They have Uber, as in terms of threats, Uber has very low profit margins, but obviously they're looking to improve that at any chance they get. Like I mentioned, many legal issues, lots of competition. They have trouble keeping drivers. Most drivers don't even end up driving for Uber for over a year. And public transportation, which, I mean, I'd rather take a car than a bus, but like they do compete with that regardless. So this is just like another breakdown of what I talked about with the diagram. The competitor analysis, obviously their biggest competitor is Lyft, and like I mentioned, they have a very, very similar marketing like strategy or marketing plan to Lyft. One thing Lyft does really, really well is they pair with other businesses to grow the brand and connect the market. So like currently right now, I was in Florida for spring break, I flew on Delta, and if you needed to, you could book an Uber on the Delta app to come get you like from your location right when you got off the plane. You could, as you were getting your luggage, you could hit the button and your Uber would be waiting for you to take you wherever you needed to go. And so that's really big because that creates like, I don't remember the word I'm looking for, but that creates good, I don't know what it is, but that, you know, it's very convenient for the customer. So, and by pairing with big businesses like that, it also creates it shows they're dependable and reliable. They also paired with like MasterCard. You could get like a certain percent off of your Uber ride if you pay with your MasterCard, things like that. Lyft is also very clear with its brand values and is actively involved in social issues. And I know Sarah mentioned with like the Uber analysis, Uber is doing that as well, but sometimes Lyft just does it a little bit better, which makes them more attractive to the customer. For the first mover and late mover advantages, Uber was the first mover in this case. They were the first one to be there and be like, hey guys, what do you think of ride sharing? And this kind of backfired on them a little bit because they had nothing to compare it to. So I would argue that Lyft had the late mover advantage because they were able to see everything that Uber did wrong and what didn't work for Uber. And with having that ability, they could make their ride sharing platform and marketing that much better because they could see Uber's mistakes and where they went wrong. But because Uber did start first, they still control 70% of, which is the largest percent of the market. Like they had that advantage because they were there first. They have, you know, little bits of customer loyalty and, like I said, that brand to working with different brands that people know. Because like if Uber already works with Delta, Lyft isn't gonna work with Delta because Delta's not gonna wanna work with Lyft type thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it.